Thank you, and welcome everybody. A huge shout out to my co-authors on this, Magda, Nenycz-Thiel, Rachel Kennedy, and Steve Bellman at the University of South Australia. Magda, Rachel, and Steve and I collaborate on a continuous basis, doing research on all kinds of questions, including in the Beyond 30 project, which I'll talk about. And this is one of the projects that we collaborated on together. So we really enjoy that partnership, and we've had a lot of really exciting studies together, and we're going to share with you. So today we're going to be looking at short ads, and by short ads here we're talking about something like the 6-second ads, which we now see and which exist in as kind of like an option within the media landscape, and what impact that ultimately has. So let's go to the next slide. So what we're going to do is kind of like see what some of the opportunities are and also what some of the limitations are. So that's the goal of the research today. Next slide. So the background on this is we did 3 studies many moons ago, many years ago, in the Beyond 30 research project. If you could advance it. Beyond 30 is a collaborative project between Ehrenberg-Bass and MediaScience, our company. It started at Murdoch University in 2005, and when I left Murdoch to basically spend my time full-time with MediaScience, I took the project across and moved it across to Ehrenberg-Bass, and we've been collaborating since then on the project. There were 3 specific studies here. Now, just to give you all a background in terms of what Beyond 30 is, every year we have a consortium of sponsors who come together, and this is most TV networks and a lot of the big global brands. And we all come together and collectively we decide on 4 research questions each year that we will prioritize. And collectively we do this research. So there were 3 studies that make up the foundation for the research that I'm showing today. So next click. One of those is Beyond 30 Study 56, which looked at comparing 15s, 30s, and 60s. Now, even though that's not the focus of the 6-second ad we're going to talk about today, we actually used the same ads. So these were ads for which we could find 30s, 15s, and 60s. So that was the basis of it. And then we did cut downs of those. Now, at that time when we did this research, there were no 6-second ads yet in the television landscape. So we created a hypothetical short ad of the future, and the unit of time that we picked for that was half of a 15, which for us was 7. So the research that we're sharing with you today is based on 7-second ads, because of course the 6-second ad as a concept didn't yet exist in television. So the next 2 studies are studies 68, which looked at how the 7-second ad compared to a 15 and a 30, and study 69, which then added in elements of frequency and duration, and that's going to have some interesting particular limitations and opportunities for 6s, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. Next slide. So, sorry, collectively, the measures included biometric measures, skin conductivity, heart rate, facial expression analysis, as well as surveys. The total sample size across the studies was 689, which is large for this type of research. Now, first I'm going to focus on memory effects. The benchmark that we're going to talk about here in our particular sample, unaided recall had, the average unaided recall rate was about 15% for 30. And what we're going to see is that when we double that, so let's go ahead and click, or half that, we see that we're getting about 12% unaided recall, which is about 80% of what we're seeing. So this is kind of consistent with the principle that we've seen in other research as well. We also had a 60. Now these are for the same brands, they're for the same ads, they're actually shorter versions of the same ad ultimately. And we had about 23%. And then with the 7-second ad, which was the unknown element, we had a 9% unaided recall. And this is kind of interesting because it turns into a little bit of a nice graph. So if we go to the next slide, which is this effect efficiency, estimate. Again, these are just estimates based on these numbers. So let's go ahead and click. So we can see that a 15 to a 30 in our data represented about an 80% efficiency. In other words, a 15 is delivering about 80% of a 30. And conversely, a 60 is delivering about 125, not 200, but about 125% of a 30. And then conversely, we can now go down and we see that a 7 was delivering about 60% of a 30. So that's leading us to a really interesting principle, at least emerging out of this data. It's early by this stage, but it gives us a little bit of a principle, which is that a 7-second ad can deliver about 60% of the memory efficiency of a 30. Let's go ahead and click. So that's our little principle that we're going to walk away with today. Click. Now, what happened emotionally, though, is very interesting, because even though in terms of memory, you could achieve a memory result of about 60% efficiency, even with only a very short duration, you can see that on the emotional dynamic, it's actually a very different kind of ad, and it's working in a very different way. So go ahead and click. What we're seeing here is this is the 7, which has a very flat narrative structure. So what we've taken is we've taken whatever the duration was, and we've equalized it to basically the equivalent of 15 samples. And when you look at that data, you can see that if we look at the emotional arc of the story, you're actually seeing a very flat structure. And this is done using the probability of smiling in this case, using our facial expression analysis. Conversely, a 30 provides you with a real dynamic experience. So you're going through a range of emotions, a range of your journey has ups and downs within it, whereas 7 doesn't really have enough opportunity. So what this is telling us is the narrative structure is very different. A 30 is still giving you a far more emotive ad, but the 7 can actually be remembered. So that's kind of where we see a lot of the main difference between the two of them. Next slide. However, there is a problem, and that is that if you have a lot of 6-second ads or 7-second ads, as the case would be, then the benefit diminishes dramatically. So we know this by using our skin conductivity measure. So let's go ahead and look at the first slide. We had 3 different conditions. Click again. So here we're looking at the 7-second ads with normal clutter or high clutter, and the 15-second ads with normal and high clutter. And you can see that the extent to which people are actually responding and reacting to the ad diminishes dramatically once clutter is added in, even more so once that is in an environment with 7-second ads. So that's a real drawback to the model, is that you're getting a great limitation there with once you start introducing clutter. So it's the kind of thing that could work without too much frequency. On the next click, and one more click. Similarly, if we look at brand recall, we can see that again, that starts to diminish with clutter, and with very high clutter with 7s, it's actually very dramatic. So you have a dramatic reduction there. So what this tells us is that 7-second ads or 6-second ads can work and they can be effective, but we have to treat them cautiously, because in other Beyond 30 research, what we've demonstrated is that clutter is not a function of time, it's a function of ad units. So if you had the same amount of time, but you packed in more ads, you would actually be significantly increasing the consumer's perception of clutter, which would diminish the impact of the ads within that environment. So we have to treat ads cautiously for that reason. We can shorten the ad break, but we can't just pack in more ad inventory, because we're going to diminish the gain that we're getting. So just a couple of key takeaways from the research, and just one clarification as well. What we were testing in this particular study were cut downs. So they were 15-second ads that we cut down to 7s. So it's working in a particular way because, of course, it's reminding you of the ad that you've seen in the longer duration, particularly when we have frequency added in there. But of course, today, many ads are produced that are entirely original and not a cut down. So we refer to this difference as whether a 6-second ad has inherent value or inherited value. Inherent value means it was actually produced and created as a 6-second ad, and it's very different, and we haven't tested the benefit of that. We would assume that that's an interesting research question. But an inherited one is where it's inheriting the value through a longer one, and often the benefit is that it's acting as a memory cue. It's reminding you. One other thing I should also clarify, one of the reasons why, based on other research that we've done, why the 7-second ad is so effective is we've discovered that a lot of the impact of an ad occurs in the first 5 seconds of the ad, where people are making a go, no-go decision around, and a lot of that is driven by things like their relationship with the brand, their relationship with the product, etc. So that's the reason why those first 5 seconds can be so critical. So our conclusion, 6-second ads do work. They deliver about 60% of the value of a traditional 30, at least relative to memory. But it's a new creative arena. There are new opportunities, but there are also new limitations. And so we hope that this will be an arena that will see a lot more research going into the future, because we think it's actually got a lot of opportunity, not in isolation, but as part of a media mix.